This is Scott Becker with the Becker's Healthcare webinar. Thrilled today to get to visit with three great leaders on the following subject: a Chief Operating Officer's strategy for achieving robotics service line excellence. We're joined by three speakers from Mercy General. And Mercy General is important because one, it's a 300+ bed hospital. Two, it's built a magnificent robotics services line. And three, it's won all kinds of awards for quality and prestige. So a great institution. We're joined today by three leaders in the institution. We're going to talk about their strategy and the how-tos of building their surgical services line. They happen to be intuitive Da Vinci robot users, and we'll talk about that, but we'll really talk about building a great minimally invasive, digitally assisted surgical line. The three leaders we have with us, the Chief Operating Officer of the Hospital of Mercy General, Devin Johnson. We're also joined by Vice President and Chief Nursing Officer, Allison Cottrell. All of these leaders are from Dignity Health Mercy General. And finally, Dr. Brent Jackson, Vice President and Chief Medical Officer at Dignity Mercy General. I'm going to ask each one of them to discuss their sort of journey, their passion in developing the surgical services lines with robotics, and sort of where it started and where it's come to. They've now completed their 5,000th minimally invasive surgery using the Da Vinci robotic surgery line. And so we'll talk about that. Before I talk any further, let me ask the three of them to introduce themselves. Devin, let me start with you. Devin Johnson, can you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Appreciate that, Scott. Thanks. And thanks for having us here today. We're excited to be part of this conversation. My name is Devin Johnson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and I've had the pleasure of working with both Allison and Dr. Jackson for the past 4 years.
Thank you very, very much. Allison?
Hi, I'm Allison Cottrell, and I'm the Chief Nursing Officer at Mercy General Hospital, and I'm excited to be here and talk a little bit about the nursing strategies.
Thank you. And Dr. Jackson?
Hello, Scott. Good to see you again. This is Dr. Brent Jackson, Chief Medical Officer here at Mercy General. I have been in this role for about 3 years, and prior to that, the physician advisor for 1 year.
Fantastic. And I think, to correct myself in the intro, so far there's been more than 5,000 patients treated with minimally invasive robotic assisted surgery at the hospital. Devin, I think I've got that number right. It's 5,000 been treated total so far. And talk to us about this. Let's start with strategy, Devin. How did you start this? Walk us through what led to the initial development of the strategy for robotic assisted surgery there.
Yeah, it's a good question. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the clarification, because I think people are going to get excited about how they did 5,000 in that year. But as I was thinking about this question and where we would go with this, it's interesting, and we've talked about it here as a group. I personally wish that I could sit back and say, hey, coming to the hospital, I knew this was going to be a strategy. Obviously, with different places that I've worked, we've always had robotics. In fact, when I got here, we had robotics in different services, but it was it was more of a tool at that point that was made available to the surgeons. We have a business development director tall guy, a lot of energy, just a great guy on our team. He's actually the one that first kind of realized what we possibly had in our hands. And so he came up to us with a pretty excited view of what was happening with the surgeons. And it doesn't hurt that Daryl's as tall as an oak tree. And so when Daryl gets excited about something, it's sort of hard to miss him. And so he came to us and said, hey guys, you guys need to come and see what's going on with our robotic surgery. We've got docs who are here, they're engaged, they're talking with us about it. And in terms of what I need to do for the program and for the hospital, this is something we can really lean on. And so Dr. Jackson, Allison, and I had a chance to really start to engage with the physicians. And what we saw, and I think this is one of the nice things about being Mercy General, is we saw docs who really wanted to do something. They didn't want to just use a tool. They wanted to do something with robotics. We had an underutilized robot sitting at one part of the hospital. We had another one that was very, very dated. And everybody kind of knows this intuitively. Anymore, for certain specialties, you really can't get them into the hospital or in the market without having robotics available to them. And so I think that's really how we started. We really started sitting down with the leaders and the physicians and the others to say, hey, what do we want this thing to look like? And what is this going to be for us? And the docs just grabbed hold of it, and really they dealt with the access issues. They dealt with the cost issues. They kind of took on the whole picture of the robotic service as a partner to us.
And Devin, let me ask you one follow-up question on that, and then I'll ask Allison and Dr. Jackson to comment as well. When you started to really look at this as a strategy, intended to both make you a differentiator in the market, better at this, better at doing surgery at a higher quality, better value, and also strengthen yourself with recruiting physicians. I mean, there were a number of different pieces to that, weren't there?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And even, general surgery was one that we've actually seen decrease here at the hospital. And some of these specialists, we are in a very competitive market where, we have 3 hospitals within, mile and a half of each other. And so that the independent physicians have options. And so having them engage the strategy, we actually have seen some volume growth as we're part of this. We've been able to do some more complex procedures. We gave them the ability to really learn to get trained and bring the cost down for some of the other cases. And so, yeah, it's kind of fit all of those. And if it really is going to be a strategy, if it really is going to be a service, you can't just look at one piece of it. You got to look at the cost, you got to look at the volume, you got to look at the quality outcomes, and then you got to have the data to support it. And we'll talk about the data a little bit later.
Devin, thank you very, very much. And Allison, Dr. Jackson, anything you'd like to add to this in terms of the initial thoughts on building a really Da Vinci driven, intuitive driven robotics surgery line?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I would just add that I think our whole team is very, very proud of our cardiovascular program. And one of the things that this group decided they wanted to pursue was really growing our general surgery program and that robotics program, and really strive for something that was well known with robotics, just like our cardiovascular program. And I think that was also something that really inspired us to start pursuing the Robotics Center of Excellence.
Thank you very, very much. Dr. Jackson, did you want to add on to that for a moment?
Sure, Scott. We started this journey during my first year as a CMO, and so I was a bit unclear about how we would go about building and growing such a program. So we knew that one of our sister facilities, St. Joseph's in Phoenix, had done this. And so Intuitive set up a really great bright spot webinar between our team and theirs. And it was a most of the day event, and there was a lot of great information that we were able to use for the foundation and direction.
And just one quick question to that, Dr. Jackson, in terms of that initial sort of overview of what you're going to do, how it's going to look, who was part of the team from your system that had to be part of that learning to sort of at least start to level set?
So on our side, the people who participate on this are the people you have on this call, Devin, Allison, and myself, as well as our Director of Business Development, Daryl, that Devin mentioned previously. And we had a couple of our high volume robotic surgeons there as well. In fact, on that same day, we gave one of them, a gynecologic oncologist, his a plaque for his 1,000th case.
Wow, that's fantastic. And Devin, let me turn back to you and also get Dr. Jackson to comment on this line. When people start a robotics assisted surgery line and really trying to achieve excellence in this area, one of the great questions is, where do you start? And talk a little bit about how you got started, what internal discussions you had, and what that was like, and what were you thinking about, Devin?
Yeah, so there was a couple of things I think were key, and we'll talk about the team and the makeup of the team that was really important. Allison had a lot to do with getting the robotics coordinator in place to take it forward. But there were a few key places. It was good for us that we already had a foundation of docs who were wanting to support it, who were actually understanding how robotics was integral to their practice of medicine here at the hospital. I think, and I kind of failed to mention this earlier, one of the things we make sure is what they were missing was support and helping drive that strategy forward. So I think once we were able to get involved with that and understand it, we got this collaboration going between administration and the physicians with a common vision. That's where you got to start, is a common vision. And I got to hand it to Dr. Aguilar and Dr. Hassan. They are our co-medical directors of the program. One of them is with the employed medical group or the foundation medical group, and one of them is an independent. We set that up intentionally so that there's a balance in the leadership on the robotic steering committee between employed and non-employed. And they came up in partnership with us and others around, hey, what is it we want to do? We want to get the robotics certification, Center of Excellence certification. What is the role of the coordinator? How do we allocate block time? How do we work with the cardiac surgeons who are needing the service, but maybe the equipment, but maybe not as much as other doctors were. And so they helped guide a lot of that discussion and really gave us what we needed to be able to support the infrastructure, the resources, and the background and the training that our team needed here.
So Devin, I just hear you saying early inclusion of key surgeons, because going ahead with this without your key surgeon constituents would be a huge error. And then also early inclusion of chief nursing officer, Allison, chief medical director, really a lot of the surgical leadership to make sure people are really aligned and on board. Because if you get in front of any part of that, it's going to be a real problem.
Yeah, I think, we talk about strategy, and that's an important part of this topic today. Most of this is going to be talking about team. The strategy is going to develop about what your team is able to accomplish. And so the robot is critical. I mean, you can't have a robotics program without a robot, but we didn't buy a robot to go get surgeons. We ended up developing a robotic surgery program in partnership with our surgeons so that we could expand the services and the expertise here offered at Mercy General. So it was a little bit different, I guess, tact, and the team becomes really the critical part in which those strategies come out of and get executed upon.
Yeah, and so well stated, so critical. And Dr. Jackson, do you want to add on to that? I mean, this concept of you build a great team, then you figure out what to do with that team. And you had this great surgical team, then you figured out, robotics is another way to advance and strengthen our great surgical team and what we do as a hospital. Dr. Jackson?
So one of the big things that was an important driver of this is not just having the leadership, but also an engaged group of robotic surgeons who agreed to meet monthly with the executive team and the OR director and our robotics coordinator, as well as representatives from the intuitive staff, and going over data, block allocation, the cost of disposables, case durations, all of that data, and really driving forward improvements to the program at each meeting, leading to further improved iterations of the program. And it was that engagement, that collective engagement, that really, I think, is responsible for driving this program forward the way that it did.
Thank you. Sort of constant improvement, constant engagement, and really a team culture. Allison, Devin and Dr. Jackson have talked a good deal, just even getting started, and about how important team is and what a critical component this is to build teams here. Can you elaborate on the sort of foundational work within the hospital to establish the culture and the team? Allison, do you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, absolutely. Starting at the unit level, all of the nursing units have practice councils. And so they're very involved in working with the leadership team in growing programs, also looking at clinical quality and safety programs. And so then we also have sort of a large shared governance where we invite physician leadership, ancillary and nursing leadership, and all of the staff that are tied to those unit practice councils to come and partner again on those safety practices and quality improvement projects and share best practices of the hospital. And so I think the hospital's done a really good job of creating that culture across the entire facility, but we're also really striving to work more and more closely with the physicians to meet their needs as customers, but also to make sure that our staff are well prepared for the different procedures and surgeries that they bring here. And I would add that Kayla, our robotics coordinator, has been really critical to that whole program. She's really come in and has established herself. She has a great reputation with the physicians. She's extremely knowledgeable about robotics cases, the equipment. She does training for us with our OR employees, nurses and techs, and really partners with us again at that robotics committee that we talked about being multidisciplinary. So she's been a real critical part of that, as well as the OR director, Patty Armand, has really come together to partner with us all along the way.
And let's talk about that for one more moment. Let me follow up with you on the robotic service line coordinator just a little bit. And then we'll want to come back to Devin on team and culture as well. When you're looking for a robotic service line coordinator and trying to sort of make this not just a good program, but a magnificent program and a key part of improving the hospital's delivery of surgical services, what did you look for in this surgical services coordinator? How did that look? What qualities were you looking for? And how important is that to the success of the program?
Well, I think the biggest thing we looked for somebody that was clinically competent, that had been doing robotics cases right before they came here. We wanted them to have a lot of knowledge about the different types of cases, the equipment, had a really good, strong ability to create really in-depth relationships with the physicians, was an excellent listener. I think that's a really critical component to make sure that we as a hospital understand the physician needs as well as the patient needs, and how do we translate that to the care that we actually provide in the OR setting. So we were really fortunate to find Kayla. She had the people skills, she had the clinical knowledge, and she also had a lot of internal drive to make the program great. And I would say she was probably a critical add to our team to help us really stay on track with pursuing that standard of excellence and really growing the clinical component of it with the physicians and developing sort of like an OR training program within the OR team itself.
No, fascinating. So someone who's a great listener, great teacher, great personal skills, great clinical skills, and then also the motivation to make this all go, that somebody's excited about, passionate about making it great, not just sort of getting by, but making a magnificent robotic services line. Devin, let me ask you a couple of follow-up questions to that, then I'll ask Dr. Jackson to key in as well. Devin, when you look at sort of the culture of the hospital, building teams at the hospital, do you want to talk about that a little bit in both building that great team culture and culture at the hospital, and then applying that to the robotic service line as well? Devin, do you want to join in there for a moment?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. You know, I think that's probably, well, we're biased, but I think that's probably one of the things that we really feel special about Mercy General is the team culture. And we've all experienced the need for that culture during COVID and the challenges associated with that. You know, a lot of it goes down to, making sure people are empowered, that they have the ability to do the things that are appropriate and are going to lead to safe, quality outcomes at the hospital and can move forward, and then know that they're going to be supported by leadership and administration when they do that. One example, if you don't mind me sharing with you real quick, Scott, the robotic service, for us to get it going, there had to be a number of very crucial conversations. Some of them went well, some of them did not go so well. When we first had to talk about cost savings and making sure we were using the robot appropriately, that obviously got their attention, and that was a difficult conversation. And I think, that was one that the doctors after a while began to understand, and you'll see it some of the data. The other one that was probably more poignant at the very beginning was we already had 2 robots when we started. One was older, one was a newer robot, but it was used specifically for cardiac surgery. And we found that it just wasn't getting used there. And we had this huge access need for all of the other providers. And so we were able to sit with the surgeons and the OR team and the clinical team and say, okay, how do we approach decisions around utilization in a more unified manner? And I could really have to hand it to the docs to take this on, and Kayla, who really did a nice job providing the data on this. We began to look at that, and our surgeons went and they sat with us, and Brent remembers this because he was a big part of this, had to go talk with the cardiac surgeons and say, hey, we know we bought this for you. We know that this was an intentional buy for our cardiac program, but it's an underutilized resource. And so over time, and through those discussions, we've been able to matriculate that robot into the larger robotic program, which has really helped 2 things. First of all, it's helped access, but it helped the doctors realize, hey, we got your back. When you recognize these issues, and if you're willing to support us in the difficult conversations, we'll support you and we'll be there with you as well too. And it becomes a partnership in that conversation.
Thank you very, very much. And Dr. Jackson, do you want to also sort of add some thoughts around, Devin had talked about some of these difficult conversations, whether I'm trying to make sure we're using the robotic assisted surgical program efficiently, whether we're doing it in a smart, cost-effective way that adds value for everybody, whether we're sharing resources well. Dr. Jackson, you want to talk a little bit about some of the team and the efforts there that went into some of those things?
Yeah, I can remember that vividly. I remember we had some outside consultants that came in to look at a number of different expenses across our division, not just robotics. And I was tasked with introducing these consultants at one of our robotics committee meetings And as they unveiled their presentation, the robotic surgeons took it as an assault on the program and an attempt to kill the program, which lost me a lot of political capital. And the buzz around the hospital the next day was that I personally was trying to kill the robotics program, and nothing could have been further from the truth. Fortunately, as the meeting had gone on, some cooler heads prevailed, and as we got to the slides that actually had data, someone said, look, we have data. Let's look at the data. Let's see what we can get out of the data. And that's when a genuine conversation started around the cost of the disposables, how there might be some benefit to standardizing to some degree the disposables that are used and perhaps getting better pricing. That was the beginning of some of that collaboration that went into trying to see how we could make the program more efficient. And, you know, to the point about Devin mentioning about cases being done appropriately, there were some cases that the committee kind of looked at and said, that case was done on the robot. Why was that case done on the robot? And then, you know, a little bit of internal peer review there to try to identify what are the appropriate cases to be done. And again, this is just the team-based nature of this group.
But it's fascinating, really, because the perspective, if they don't hear it right, can be that you're trying to kill the program. And the reality is you wanted to double and triple down on the program, make the program better and become a real beacon for the hospital and the health system and strengthen it. And it's sort of getting through some of the discussions, so uncluttered the discussions so people hear it and get the right data and so forth, so they understand what you're trying to say. We want this to be great. We're not trying to slow it down at all. We just want it to be done intelligently, efficiently, and well used. It's a fascinating perspective. And Devin, talk about the relationship with Intuitive, because you folks have worked closer to collaborate with Intuitive, take it sort of to the next level to share and analyze your own hospital's data to better inform your own strategy, to understand the truth, the facts, everything you need to do this well. Devin, can you talk a little bit about that and about those initiatives and data sharing and data analysis with Intuitive and how that's worked?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to apologize to Intuitive off the bat here. You know, working with Intuitive in my past was kind of a vendor relationship, you know, and not necessarily a partner relationship where you were purchasing a piece of equipment for your surgeons and you wanted to use it the best you could, but it was really a vendor relationship. And I do have to hand it to Intuitive and their team. You know, they and the doctors spent some time. Dr. Jackson talked about the bright spot we did with another hospital. Allison and I got to attend a local presentation and listen to what some of the surgeons were doing. You know, and they, you know, we can be skeptical by nature, where that's part of what we get paid for, is to be skeptical. And so it was helpful to have them guide the three of us through some of these discussions, and they've been really good. One of the things that one of our medical directors was really wanting from us was better data. And Dr. Jackson was talking about it. We had our cost data, but we didn't know what was the total cost per case, how fast were the cases going compared to laparoscopic or open cases, what was our quality outcomes for robotic versus other cases. And you know, I think that's where we really started to see this relationship start to turn, as we could start using Intuitive's partnership to not only help us know how to use the robot and standardize some things, but to really say, okay, what are we trying to do with this and what data is going to support this?
There's been some discussion about using the robots, the Da Vinci robots, on some of the less complex cases to try and sort of teach surgeons how to use the robot so that when they move to more complex cases, they've had great experience in learning on some cases that are more complex. You know, there's been some objection that, you know, that could be expensive, that the learning curve or that the cost of doing non-complex surgeries on the Da Vinci could be an issue. But what you've really learned is that once people are doing enough cases, they become very, very efficient and get better outcomes, even on sort of some of the benign cases with the Da Vinci robots. Devin, can you help me out on that? Is that a correct statement, that as you get some experience in these things, as surgeons get some experience in these things, they seem to do better even on benign cases in efficient, quickly, high quality, and so forth? Any thoughts there and what your data shows you?
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate the way you teed that up, and that's exactly right. I think one of the concerns that we had was, you know, you open up the surgery use to all these cases, and we're just going to increase our overall cost of care by using the robot. And But then we also had to give the opportunity for the docs to train and get competent on the robot. And two of the procedures that we were looking at with the benign GYN, the benign general surgery cases, were ones that were of concern. And what we found that over time, and it was a fairly short period of time, as they got more experience, it actually lowered the robotic cases actually had a lower overall cost per case, and actually had a lower time of surgery as well too. So there were shorter case duration as well for each of those the benign GYN and benign general surgery cases.
So you ultimately fairly quickly got to the cost and quality you wanted, even though there were initial objections that, oh my God, this might cost more, this might not. But as soon as surgeons got a little bit more competent on it, and they did so pretty quickly, the learning curve was pretty quick, you ended up in a spot where better quality, lower cost, and overall thrilled with it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Thanks, Scott.
And let me ask you a question about outcomes. I mean, we've now done at Mercy General, you've become really, truly a surgical center of excellence for robotic surgery. Is sort of intuitive points to it with pride, and rightfully so. And you folks have done this magnificent job there. Talk a little bit about, how do you measure success? What metrics have been important to you to measure the success? We all know you've done thousands of cases, which itself is unusual. But you know, the team, as the surgeons there have done with the nursing team, how do you measure success? What are the key performance metrics that you're looking at, Dr. Jackson?
So we're looking at a number of things. You know, one, we look at how long the cases are taking to get done compared to traditional laparoscopic or open cases. If they're inpatients, length of stay, complication rates, opioid use. And if we see an improvement in those metrics across the board relative to laparoscopic or open cases, then it tells me we're doing something right.
Fascinating. Things like the time that you're in the patient, the time of the case, length of stay, complication rates, opioid use, how much pain is the patient having? Are we having to rely too heavily on opioids and so forth? Hey, Allison, did you want to comment also on how you sort of look at, you know, success metrics and how you look at how things are going?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking at infection rates as well. And near and dear to my heart is patient experience. We're always evaluating patient experience scores, and our acute surgical unit, where these patients do recover, have really, really strong engagement scores. They're in the 80th to 90th percentile. We're very, very proud of that. Our surgeons are very happy with the nursing care that's provided there, as is our patients. And I'm very proud to say that our nursing communication scores are very high in that department, as well as the physicians. And we track that. We want to make sure our patients are understanding what they need to do when they go home for discharge, how we're treating them for the pain management. So that's definitely something we look at on a monthly basis, and we really track and trend our yearly improvements as well.
No, fantastic. Things like infection rate, patient experience, patient engagement, the nursing communications, nursing engagement, is the staff enjoying it? Are the patients enjoying it? Do the patients leave healthier than they otherwise would with minimally invasive surgery, with robotic assisted surgery? Just fantastic. And Devin, anything that you wanted to add on there as well?
I think they got them all. I don't know if there are any more metrics out there that we would look at. I'm always have something I can add on it apparently, but you know, I think when you're talking about a service line, and this is the difficult conversation we always have, is it becomes really easy to talk about one part of it. And you really have to get to the point where you're looking at the cost, you're looking at the growth, you're looking at the experience, you're looking at the quality and the safety of it. And in a way that's not abstract for the physicians, it's actually meaningful that drives to some sort of activity and follow-up that takes place. And the team's done a really nice job of that here, is broadening the vision and still pushing to certain things. And, you know, it's a teeter-totter. We swing back and forth in our expertise and our success in that, but we do a nice job trying to broaden that vision and then have actionable outcomes.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about that and sort of the outcomes and where you're going with this. You've had, over the last several years, tremendous success in building a program from scratch to one of true excellence. How do you look at expanding surgical offerings, robotic surgical offerings? What does the future look like? How do you see that?
Well, I think there's going to be a few things. I mean, we, like you said earlier, we have 7 specialists, specialties, more specialists who are currently here. I think as we look at that, are there more that are coming into the robotic program? Specifically here at Mercy General, we use the robots for our inpatient ORs, primarily in that area. We're strategically trying to figure out, okay, what cases make sense in an outpatient surgery center that's attached to the hospital versus an ASC. And I think in our long-term vision, we will probably go from a two robot program to a 3-robot program, with one of them dedicated to those day patients in the outpatient surgery program. They can still do those more complex same-day surgeries that just need a little more recovery down there. I think that's going to be the next state. And then, of course, bringing on the other specialists, getting them engaged with the robotic steering committee, and ensuring that they have the access and the support they need.
Yeah.
Thank you. So deeper in the specialty lines you are, so you're doing 7 specialties now. So more and more surgeons in those specialties using it if they're not already. More specialties, movement towards outpatient as well as inpatient, where it makes a great deal of sense. And at some point expands from 2 robots to 3, at least as a starting point, how you broad look at strategy going forward.
Yeah, essentially. That's exactly.
Thank you. And Dr. Jackson, did you want to comment as well on sort of what some of the newer opportunities look like? And maybe if there's any granularity in some of the specialties or things that you see in terms of how you look at this?
Yeah, so, as the platforms evolved, it started out with the earlier iterations were really good for urology and gynecology, where your operative field is kind of like a bread box, but the XI current iteration has really kind of expanded the utility of the robot in the operative field, so it doesn't have to be redocked anytime there's another quadrant be operated in the abdomen. So there's general surgery and other surgical specialties oftentimes can be multi-quadrant, and so it's time consuming to redock the robot, not having to be done with the XI. So to be more specific about what Devin was talking about, the specialties we have using the robot are cardiac surgery, urology, general surgery, colorectal surgery, gynecology, gynecologic oncology, and surgical oncology. And so as more and more indications for the robot become accepted or innovated, then we're going to see more and more specialties adopt this. Now, I don't know that we're going to see it being done for joint replacements, but who knows?
Probably sooner or later, though. Maybe not right now, but probably sooner or later, though. Allison, you've got the hard job of coordinating the entire team around this, from the surgical services coordinator, the robotic surgical services coordinator, to working with Devin, Dr. Jackson, plus the doctors, the surgeons, and the entire staff, the nursing staff. What are some of your thoughts here? What do you see in terms of like what could be built on, and what are you excited about?
Well, we've spent a lot of time actually looking at how our ORs are utilized. And I have to give a lot of credit to the schedulers and Patty Armand. They really focus on how well certain ORs are utilized, time of day by certain providers. And actually, we get together as a team of physicians, the OR team, the group of us, and look at that utilization and look at how can we better provide options for physicians to join on and pick up cases on the Da Vinci on maybe days where a physician has dropped off a case, maybe a case got canceled. So we're constantly looking at how can we better utilize that schedule, where can the Da Vinci be used and what ORs, and partnering with the physicians to free up more time. And they've done a great job too around if a physician is not able to use their block time, to really release that time and open it up for the greater group. And we have a very, very good group of schedulers who will reach out to physicians who put their name on the waiting list, so to speak, to pick up those time slots. So I think there's a lot of opportunity still within that. And I anticipate we'll get better and better at that over time.
But Allison, it's such a great perspective, because so much of this is this mix of persuasion and intelligent logistics, and just great logistics. If this person's not using it, how do we sensibly tell this person you're not using it? Can we move it to somebody else to stay? How do we get to somebody else? Make sure we're growing the base of people that are using it, have the opportunity to use it, particularly when it's not going to be used 24/7. It's and a great job with it. It's fascinating, actually.
Well,
I mean, the different parts that make this work.
Yeah, and I would add to it also ties into that whole customer service piece that we're trying to improve upon with our physicians, that as long as we're opening up times when time would have otherwise been wasted, and we release it to them, we let them know about it, they'll continue to bring us more and more business. So we want them to be happy with the time that they have here.
Oh, just fantastic. And Devin, let me ask you, I'm going to ask each of the three of you some parting words of wisdom and thoughts, the advice you give to others that are looking at the robotic services lines, working with DaVinci, working with Intuitive. Devin, you talked about the first time one of your leaders came to you, I take it an administrative layperson and said, we really should be doing this. We should be really after this robotic services line. And any parting words of wisdom from that initial inception of the program to now where you've done 5,000 plus surgeries, as to any parting words of wisdom for others in looking at these programs?
You mean beyond listen to them, right? I think one mistake we made, and I would caution everybody, is we took too long responding to the physicians. This was an easy win for us. I mean, in all reality, we had good doctors, and they were borderline going to get frustrated if Daryl hadn't stepped up and kind of brought this opportunity to our attention in a more acute way. They were borderline going to get frustrated with what our delays in getting this. And so I think shortly my word of wisdom would be spend some time with your docs and see what's causing their issues around this. They need help with focus and making, to Allison's point, making sure all the operations in the back end and logistics, this Tetris game that is running a hospital, is taken care of. But sit down and listen to them. They'll help guide a lot of this. They'll help you understand it. Brent was instrumental to make sure we didn't, abuse it in the wrong way, but that's a pretty easy win once you get started.
And so it goes back so much to basics of listening to your doctors, listening to your team, hearing what's going on and engaging, so that you can see these opportunities that seem like, when you mentioned it, ultimately it's been not just an easy win, it's been a great big win. I mean, it's really helped solidify and strengthen the surgical program in total at Mercy General. So it's great advice. Allison, did you want to add any comments on words of wisdom that people should think about? I mean, obviously, so much has been about getting the right coordinator, constantly nurturing that team, the logistics, the working with everybody, patient experience. Anything you wanted to add as well? And then I'll ask Dr. Jackson the same question.
Well, it's similar to what Devin said. It's listening to your team. And when Patty Armand came to me and said, we really need to have a robotics coordinator, our team's really stretched thin. It's hard to keep that focus on creating the structure for the program itself. I really took the time to make sure I understood what her ask was. She wanted that dedicated employee. And so we looked within her departments to see, okay, we have to do this budget neutral, but how do we make it work? And so we actually had a vacancy available, and we converted that position to a coordinator and said, let's take a chance on this and see where it goes. Let's make this a focus of the department, because if we have that person, they're going to help us really grow the volume, and the resource will pay for itself down the road. So I think empowering your team to make good decisions and take some chances. And then also, I would say the second thing that was just as important again was that that robotics program, like really creating the structure so that you're meeting all of the needs, the clinical, the quality, the safety, the growth, the physician customer service, the training for the employees, and looking at the metrics. So really create that structure. And if you have that, then you're going to create goals that you'll actively achieve to make it all work.
Thank you very, very much. And Dr. Jackson, we've heard a lot about when one listens in, you really get the sense of a great leadership team that's both open-minded, but willing then to execute on things, really to really try and push to make them happen and really learn and grow and try and build greatness and excellence. Dr. Jackson, in building teams, we've talked a lot about building teams and how important it was to fill those teams out with the right people trying to do the right things. Brent, would you comment for a moment on any additional words of wisdom that you would add for someone who's looking at this, other systems looking at it, people trying to look at building a great robotic surgery program, a DaVinci program? What other advice would you give people?
So what I have to say is, going back to what my two colleagues have said, is active listening of what the surgeons need. I mean, it's getting the right people in the room, but also listening. And I'll share in the name of full transparency that I was very early in my role as a CMO when some of these original conversations were happening. And I think I probably have to take responsibility for the frustration that the surgeons had, because they were trying to push for the robotics platform. And I, as a general surgeon, had never really seen the value of the robotic platform for general surgery. And I shared that with them, and they were kind of aghast at my comments. But what I didn't realize is that there was a new generation of robot that had come out, the XI that I was referring to, that completely overcame the things that led to my original resistance. And so once I learned that, I kind of got on board with helping to support the program. But I was not an early supporter, and I think I probably initially slowed down the development of this program. So I would say listen to your docs as well.
But the flip side to that is how important is that you were willing to be open in your concerns versus sort of hiding the ball, that you were transparent. I've just not seen this work, and that you're also willing to learn. And many of us as leaders aren't willing to do those two things. Be open about our thoughts, because it's sometimes people judge you for them, and then being willing to learn. I get it. There's new programs, there's new robots, there's improved versions of the Da Vinci. It's better for this, better for that, and just see that. What a magnificent discussion. Devin, Allison, Dr. Jackson, I want to thank you for joining us in this Becker's Healthcare webinar, sponsored by Intuitive. Just magnificent when Intuitive and the Da Vinci robot and the computer-assisted surgery, what's happened here and how it's grown, digitally assisted surgery, magnificent. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank our audience. Any questions that you submit, any questions you've submitted, we'll make sure are responded to, either from somebody from Mercy General or from Intuitive. One of the two, depending on the question. But thank you so much for joining us today. Just a magnificent discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.